like the propaganda and getting good information out is hard. The other big one that was today was the truckfuls of prisoners they took, and people are arguing whether they're civilians or Hamas agents, and you just don't have enough information to make a determination,
Yeah,
I think.
it's people in a truck.
It's people in a truck stripped down to their underwear. That is the most accurate statement I can make about that without
Yeah.
it being wrong. But tonight, I kind of wanted to talk about this article from Plus 972 magazine, which talks about how Israel is selecting targets. Um, and I also want to talk about the kerfuffle in Congress that became worse today when the Senate decided to pass on passing the funding bill before, which means that it's unlikely to get passed before end of session. So, to start with this article came out at the end of November, plus 972. I've been sharing it around furiously, but we're going to talk about it. It is plus 972 is kind of independent e-magazine in Israel that has somehow relatively managed to get around the fact that Israel doesn't really have a free press. They're able to operate and publish things like this, and because of like the penalties that you can come under in Israel for stuff like this, they have to be pretty confident to put this out. If you don't know, Israel held over from when the law from the British Mandate, which requires any press to be certified by the government, which is antithetical necessarily to being a free press environment.
They're more than happy to say, well, we'd like you, so we'll certify you. We don't like them because they favor our opponents. We aren't going to certify them.
Yeah, for example, even like the last 2 months, Haaretz, one of the bigger newspapers that most non-Israeli citizens get access to, has been suggested that, or it has been suggested by a Likud cabinet member, that their certification be pulled. So that's it's just par for the course. It kind of also really sticks in the craw of anyone who tries to argue that Israel is the region's only democracy.
Yeah.
So anyway, this article talks a bit about the AI that Israel's using, and I a lot of people focused on that. That's a little less like it's a thing. It's a little less of a thing to me than other than how they are using the AI basically to make permissions for themselves. So let's kind of go into this. And the Israeli army's expanded authorization for bombing non-military targets, the loosening of constraints regarding expected civilian casualties, and the use of artificial intelligence system to generate more potential targets than ever before, appear to have contributed to the destructive nature of the initial stages of Israel's current war on the Gaza Strip. An investigation by Plus 972 magazine and Local Call reveals. These factors, as described by current and former Israeli intelligence members, have likely played a role in producing what has been one of the most deadly military campaigns against Palestinians since the Nakba of 1948. The investigation by Plus 972 and Local Call is based on conversations with 7 current and former members of the Israel's intelligence community, including military intelligence and Air Force personnel, who were involved in Israeli operations in the besieged Strip, in addition to Palestinian testimonies, data, and documentation from the Gaza Strip, and official statements by the IDF spokesperson, who is a piece of work, I point out, and other Israeli state institutions. So, like, I, on the whole, found that pretty remarkable in the first place, that they got people to talk. Like,
Yeah.
anonymously, obviously, which some people have tried to claim is discrediting, but, like, not really. The penalty, again, for speaking out of turn and this kind of stuff. Like, we're talking classified information they're commenting on here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You go revealing anything about current ongoing military operations, and technically that could be a form of espionage.
Yes. And they take it a significant, like, we are a little about espionage. Like, we might eventually get around to getting you on trial Obviously, we take our time in a lot of cases about this, but Israel is big, really big on this. They are quick like bunnies on these cases. So
Yeah.
compared to previous Israeli assaults on Gaza, the current war, which Israel has named Operation Iron Swords, and which began in the wake of the Hamas-led assault on southern Israel on October 7th, has seen the army significantly expand its bombing of targets that are not distinctly military in nature. These include private residences as well as public buildings, infrastructure, high-rise blocks, which the sources say the army defines as power targets. So, to clarify, before we get too far into this and make it seem too salacious, you are, under certain conditions, as long as you meet a set of criteria, able to fire on civilian buildings in a war situation, provided they are being used for a military purpose, that the target in and of itself is of a value that any damage to civilian property or to the civilians themselves is worth it, basically. That's what the term proportional means. A lot of people have been throwing the word around pretending that proportionality is a stacking of bodies against one against the other. It is the worth of the target versus what damage you have to cause to get the target. Hang on.
And proportionality can, to some extent, be mitigated by how you target or choose to engage that particular target. So I'll take example from the Second Gulf War, the invasion of Iraq, where there would be cases of, we suspect that this building is being used by the bad guys for whatever nefarious purpose. We want to drop a 2,000-pound bomb on it. Does the lawyer say it's okay? He says no, because that building is ready, next door to a mosque or a school or a hospital. You can't do that. So then they would adjust the size of the bomb, the angle from which it would engage the target, etc., so that whatever the building that was next to it would hopefully not be damaged significantly or at all.
Yes. Yeah, it's not a black and white case. And I've been incredibly frustrated this last couple months talking about this and seeing other people talk about this, because it's not cut and dry. And it's not something that we can also, because we're not getting a whole lot of good information out of Gaza. It's not like all we have to go on is what Israel is saying they're doing.
That's definitely part of the problem here, is that both sides are engaged in a vicious propaganda war where, each side is almost trying to outdo the other in the absurdity of the claims it's making.
Yes.
So you can't believe anything that's coming out of the region.
Yeah, I kind of commented a little bit on that today on Twitter. I mentioned that both Russian and IDF propaganda largely assume that we're stupid, and it's been amazing to me how many people have proven themselves to be stupid. The biggest issue for me is, for example, I saw an IDF Twitter post today where they showed imagery from Hamas fighters, alleged Hamas fighters. I'm not sure how they got this off of them unless they captured the ones in question. And again, there's not enough information to make a chain of evidence determination, right? Where they're in an abandoned building and they're like, look at these terrorists using this civilian building. I'm like, the occupation of a civilian building, if it's been cleared of civilians, is perfectly acceptable behavior for a military unit.
No.
It's a context war more than anything.
Everybody knows that's
Yeah, it's a context war.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of deceptive imagery persuasion going around. For example, a lot of people probably saw people reposting this tree branch that fell in someone around Tel Aviv. Oh, it was a rocket attack. The rocket hit the tree, and there's no sirens going off or anything. So it's very clearly not a rocket attack. And I guess it was determined to be a piece of shrapnel that bounced off of something and fell and cut a tree limb. And like, if a rocket explodes on a tree, you're not going to dodge out of the way like of a tree limb and be okay. Like
Yeah.
the rocket shrapnel and the tree burst shrapnel alone is going to make you know something happened to you. You're going to be leaky,
Very much so.
probably terminally leaky. So like the propaganda and getting good information out is hard. The other big one that was today was the truckfuls of prisoners they took, and people are arguing whether they're civilians or Hamas agents, and you just don't have enough information to make a determination.
Yeah.
I think
It's people in a truck.
it's people in a truck stripped down to their underwear. That is the most accurate statement I can make about that
Yeah.
without being wrong.
How do you know who they are? The thing that honestly surprises me more than anything else is how heavy-handed the IDF propaganda is. I would have assumed that they would be much more subtle and nuanced in what they're doing, but it's clumsy to the point that like half the videos I've seen are they go out and they find some very attractive young female IDF soldier who stands there with these mournful eyes and tells you how, oh, one of my friends was injured in the battle. Won't you please help Israel? We have to destroy these evil people. It's like, what are you doing? Appealing to the, Call of Duty crowd or something? Come on, this is so patently absurd.
Yeah, I don't get the like the affirmations that people are making that Israel has been abandoned in any shape or form.
Hell no.
There's two carriers sitting in the Eastern Mediterranean. That's like 100% more carrier than I would expect. That's
Yeah.
18% of the total carrier fleet. The super carriers, like two of the biggest warships in the world, are babysitting your ass so Hezbollah doesn't roll you over. Uh, what are you talking about? We are taking over, basically protecting everyone's transit through the Red Sea, despite the fact that we're supposed to be sharing that job with our Chinese friends, who have conspicuously fucked off.
No, how would you say such a thing?
Like, the world has basically rallied behind Israel.
Yeah, pretty much.
No one has given a thought for like the situation of Palestinians. And one of the things I've been doing is I've been working on a video essay to talk about the two-state solution and the peace process, largely Camp David Accords in 2000, which I think is representative of everything that's come since. Like, nothing's really changed.
Yeah.
At no point has Israel ever offered the Palestinians a state. It's never been a two-state solution.
Or if they're going for the one-state solution, never have they once offered to give the Palestinians proportional representation in the Knesset.
Yes. And there are other.
It's basically you all go work down on the plantation, and us masses will stay up here and lord it over you.
It's a problem too, because like the biggest just obstacle for either state in their long-term survival is economic, right? There is a good case, I think, to be made, and I'm not going to make this case in the video because I'm not an economist, and I'm just kind of going by vibes. But looking over the CIA fact books for Gaza and the West Bank, there's no opportunity to develop industry in the same way. And like Israel,
which would be an accurate statement.
Yeah, Israel.
It's basically a giant refugee camp, is all it is.
Yeah, the only significant industry is agriculture, and not even that much of the land is arable.
Yep.
The other half of it is that Israel's high tech industries, and they're generally like more complex industries, were created by massive injections of cash. Like, Israel itself would not have been sustainable even with the majority of its territory that it taken in 1948 and then in 67. It would not have been sustainable without outside support. So even if you offered the Palestinians everything they could have possibly wanted in terms of land swaps, which is already problematic on the same economic grounds, even if you'd already there's a 50-50 chance the Palestinian state collapses anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think there's an easy solution other than to say trust nobody in that area of the world. They all are playing their own secret agenda game.
Anyway, let's continue through the article makes the case. I
Sure.
protested too much. Several of the sources who spoke to Plus 972 and Local Call on the condition of anonymity confirmed that the Israeli army has files on the vast majority of potential targets in Gaza, including homes which stipulate the number of civilians who are likely to be killed in an attack on a particular target. Why are they so close to Gaza and Israel? Largely, they're close to one another on account of the fact that Israel has done fairly well for itself in every single war it's fought in capturing territory. So they have gotten closer and closer to everyone else at the same time. The actual history of putting Gaza together, or rather putting Israel together, is a lot very complex 30-year story from like 1917 onward of land buys and land grabs and all that. Basically, a slowly building mass of Israeli settlers uh, moved into the region over time, which accelerated around the 30s and 40s due to Germany. Uh, that's why they ended up so close to one another. This number is calculated and known in advance of the Army's intelligence units, who also know shortly before carrying out an attack roughly how many civilians are certain to be killed. That's important. They know what civilians are supposed to be killed, which should be a tool which lets them make the determination to choose not to strike. The problem I have had, and a lot of other observers have had, is that they appear to be striking irrespective of how many civilians are lost. In one case, discussed by the sources, the Israeli military command knowingly approved the killing of hundreds of Palestinian civilians in an attempt to assassinate a single top Hamas military commander. The number increased from dozens of civilian deaths permitted as collateral damage as part of an attack on a senior official in previous operations to hundreds of civilian deaths as collateral damage. So to be clear, in the past, if they thought 48, 64, something along those lines of people were going to be attacked, they wouldn't launch the attack. You're using an AI system and they're using ISR systems that are better than ever. They are finding either that their previous estimates were wrong, or they are just simply deciding to do it despite the fact that they have better information showing that these attacks are more deadly now.
I think there's a third option. And honestly, I think this is what it is. I think the attacks are being deliberately targeted to cause maximum civilian casualties because they're trying to send a message to Palestinian people, which is stay in your lane, stop supporting insurgent groups and terrorist groups that are causing us trouble. And so they're looking at the situation saying, get out. Collateral damage is a good thing in this case.
Yeah, there is an Israeli coin doctrine, the Dayed doctrine, which is named after a particular suburb in Lebanon that they absolutely flattened, which basically holds that the objective is to cause a massive shock to civilians. This is already problematic on the surface of it. Like, this would be unacceptable in like if you were brought before the Hague and you said, "Yeah, this was my plan," you'd be locked up.
No, absolutely.
There's an extra level of choosing to make this attack, despite knowing how much damage it can cause, with a fair degree of certainty that it's problematic too. Like I don't think that any reasonable person can argue at this point that Israel is doing all it can to avoid civilian casualties.
No, I would agree with you. I, I think that they're hoping the rest of the world will look at the situation and kind of give them a pass on what they're doing because of the horrific nature of Hamas's opening attack.
I think that's exactly the case. I also think that they're trying to reinforce that through their public relations campaign.
Oh, absolutely.
The comparing of Hamas to ISIS, which is silly
Yeah.
because they hate each other.
Yeah.
Um, the comparing, I saw people comparing Hamas to Nazis today. I've seen people argue that Hamas is worse than Nazis. Uh, they're very much trying to like even like those things like the truck of full of it prisoners, the body cams in the building, like trying to paint them as terrible for fighting from a building. Like all of those things are designed to make you think Hamas is evil. They take out any context that you might have otherwise.
Well, I will counterpoise that argument by saying I think there is a fair amount of justification to say Hamas is evil.
Oh, absolutely.
The the issue is that the Palestinian people are not evil.
Yes,
In fact,
the
many of them are victims of Hamas.
yes, the problem I have is that this takes the Palestinians and conflates them with Hamas, and it doesn't excuse what the IDF is doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is not two wrongs make a right.
This is, yeah, and this I think this next quote is telling. Nothing happens by accident. When a 3-year-old girl is killed in a home in Gaza, it's because someone in the army decided it wasn't a big deal for her to be killed. That was the price worth paying in order to hit another target. We are not Hamas. These are not random rockets. Everything is intentional. We know exactly how much collateral damage there is in every home.
Yeah.
This article could very well form the basis of a war crimes tribunal. According to the investigation, another reason for the large number of targets and extensive harm to civilian life in Gaza is the widespread use of a program called Hezbollah, the Gospel, which is largely built on artificial intelligence and can generate targets almost automatically at a rate that far exceeds what was previously possible. The AI system, described by a former intelligence officer, essentially facilitates a mass assassination factory. According to the sources, the increasing use of AI-based systems like Hezbollah allows the army to carry out strikes on residential homes. On residential homes where a single Hamas member lives on a massive scale, even those who are junior Hamas operatives. Yet testimonies of Palestinians in Gaza suggest that since October 7th, the army has also attacked many private residences where there is no known or apparent member of Hamas or any other militant group residing. Such strikes, sources confirmed to Plus 972 and Local Call, can knowingly kill entire families in the process.
My original argument there. I think it's deliberate. I don't think this is accidental. I don't think this is misunderstanding of how the algorithms work. I think they're actually getting the algorithm, so to speak, to give them maximum casualties. This is shock and awe from a different perspective.
Yeah, at a certain level, they're no longer using the AI to generate targets. They're just using the AI to generate permissions. Like, what is the fundamental difference between dropping bombs on random houses and this?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a picture right here. Look at this. Why is this building gone, but this one's still standing? Like, that's the kind of question that Israel needs to be able to answer, like, definitively, and have a good answer for. In majority of cases, the sources added, military activity is not conducted from these targeted homes. That's another problem too. Like I said, it's permissive. For example, if I was rolling through a country and someone in a church took a shot at me, I would feel justified in putting our rifle fire on that church, suppressing that target and dealing with it. I wouldn't necessarily feel justified in leveling the church. If I just randomly bomb a church, that's another problem entirely.
Yeah, there's a difference between whether it's appropriately proportional and whether it's simply just an arbitrary, I don't like the color of the paint on the door, let's blow it up.
Yes. I remember thinking that was like if Palestinian militants would bomb all the private residences of our families and Israeli soldiers go back to sleep at home on the weekend, one source who was critical of this practice recalled. In fairness, they would definitely do that if they had the opportunity. But the big problem here is that Hamas doesn't have the opportunity.
You know, I think there's something else in that equation, which is that allegedly, as a liberal democracy, yeah, I know we can go on that debate for days, but allegedly, as a liberal democracy, they're supposed to try to be better than the bad guys. And what this is showing is that when push comes to shove, no, they're just as bad as the bad guys.
Uh, yeah, I would argue that Israel is just as revisionist as Russia or China.
Yeah.
In most cases, like, not really. Also, the problem with them being a democracy is, like, technically they hold elections, but the only people who ever end up in power seem to be associated with Likud, like, since the '67 war. So,
Well, you have Begin, and I think that was legitimate. The issue is he gets assassinated by allegedly a random fellow. There's certainly no involvement by the right wingers on that.
yes. Another source said that a senior intelligence officer told his officers after October 7th that the goal was to kill as many Hamas operatives as possible, for which the criteria around harming Palestinian civilians were significantly relaxed. As such, there are cases in which we shell based on a wide cellular pinpointing of where a target is, killing civilians. This is often done to save time instead of doing a little more work to get a more accurate pinpointing, said the source. Uh, they use M777s, don't they?
I don't think so, but they do have 155 millimeter howitzers.
Yeah, they should be able to drop shells fairly precisely on things like we do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they're definitely, with the aerial bombing, they've got plenty of PGMs. They can
And they've got
JDAM the hell out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's his homebrew. That's a homebrew 155. Okay. Yeah, so they should be able to do that pinpointing shots very easily. The result of these policies is a staggering loss of human life in Gaza since October 7th. Over 300 families have lost 10 or more family members in the Israeli bombings in the past 2 months, a number that is 15 times higher than the figure from what was previously Israel's deadliest war in Gaza in 2014. At the time of writing, around 15,000 Palestinians have reported killed in the war and counting. I understand that there is some not insignificant propagandizing going on around the death counts. The United Nations has verified the Gazan numbers after every conflict. There is very little reason at the moment to assume the Gaza numbers are incorrect. By the same token, the Israeli numbers take any military-aged males and count them as Hamas, so they've probably dramatically overstated how many militants they've actually killed.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with someone who yesterday, someone who holds a dual citizenship here in the United States and Israel. We kind of had a conversation. The other thing they started doing apparently is flooding the Mediterranean side tunnels with seawater, which might be the dumbest idea I think I've ever heard. Because water gets absorbed by soil, and then it
Yeah,
causes that soil to settle. That's going to cause the foundations of these already compromised buildings to crack and break. And the buildings are basically going to fall down on the soldiers who are occupying them, which at the moment is the IDF. The Hamas operatives will simply move over 3 tunnels.
yeah, exactly.
And also, they're not going to fill those tunnels anytime soon because Earth absorbs water. Rock beats paper, or paper beats rock. You get the point.
Yeah.
All of this is happening contrary to the protocol used by the IDF in the past, the source explained. There's a feeling that senior officials in the army are aware of their failure on October 7th and are busy with the question of how to provide the Israeli public with an image of victory that will salvage their reputation. I'm not entirely certain that beating up a bunch of kids in the outer Gaza city is going to do that either, but okay. Israel launched its assault on Gaza in the aftermath of the October 7th Hamas-led offensive on southern Israel. During the attack, under a hail of rocket fire, Palestinian militants massacred more than 840 civilians and killed 350 soldiers and security personnel, kidnapped around 240 people, civilians and soldiers, and took them back to Gaza, and committed widespread sexual violence, including rape, according to a report by NGO Physicians Human Rights Israel. I have no problem believing any of those claims. How also like that Hamas was brutal in its attack, that they engaged in sexual violence. No problem believing that. However, again, does not excuse what's happening now in Gaza.
Yeah. You're doing.
Israel, well, I did that one. From the first moment after the October 7th attack, decision makers in Israel openly declared that the response would be of a completely different magnitude to previous military operations in Gaza, with the stated aim of totally eradicating Hamas. So excellent, they abandoned reality before they started this. The emphasis is on damage and not accuracy, said IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari on October 9th. The army swiftly translated these declarations into actions. According to the sources who spoke to Plus 972 and Local Call, the targets in Gaza that have been struck by Israeli aircraft can be divided roughly into 4 categories. The first is tactical targets, which include standard military targets such as arms, cells, weapon warehouses, rocket launchers, anti-tank missiles, and launch pits for mortars, bombs, military headquarters, OPs, and so on. The second is underground targets, and this is probably also another area where I feel a significant amount of bullshit is being fed our way. Mainly tunnels that Hamas has dug under Gaza's neighborhoods, which including under civilian homes. Aerial strikes on these targets could lead to the collapse of the homes above or near the tunnels, but probably not the tunnels.
Yeah.
The third is power targets, and this gets back into that Dahya doctrine, which include high rises, residential towers in the heart of cities, public buildings such as universities, banks, and government offices, like the entire Gazan Supreme Court. The idea behind hitting such targets, say 3 intelligence sources who were involved in planning or conducting strikes on power targets in the past, is that a deliberate attack on Palestinian society will exert civil pressure on Hamas. Going back to your argument. But not really, because it just makes people mad at Israel instead.
Exactly. But this is something that you find militaries that are frustrated do. And you see it, U.S. and Vietnam, the Russians and Afghanistan and Chechnya. As you get more and more frustrated, it's like the ROE begin to evaporate, and it's just like, shoot everybody. They're all bad.
Yes. It's troubling.
Yeah.
Like the conduct. Like I've had conversations with individuals I know who are currently serving, obviously who can't comment publicly because of that, but they have expressed some trepidation at the news they're hearing coming out of Israel as well. Like everyone is kind of uncomfortable with this. In the early stage of the current war, the Israeli army appears to have given particular attention to the third and fourth categories. That would be power target or family homes and power targets. Uh, According to statements on October 11th by IDF spokespersons, during the first 5 days of fighting, half of the targets bombed, 1,329 out of a total of 2,687, were deemed power targets. We were asked to look for high-rise buildings of half a floor that can be attributed to Hamas, said one source who took part in the previous Israeli offensives in Gaza. Sometimes it's a militant group spokesperson's office, which is not a combatant, or a point where operatives meet. I understand the floor is an excuse that allows the army to cause a lot of destruction in Gaza. That is what they told us. If they would tell the whole world that the Islamic Jihad offices on the 10th floor are not important as a target, but that the existence is a justification to bring down an entire high-rise with the aim of pressuring civilian families who live in it in order to put pressure on terrorist organizations, this would itself be seen as terrorism. So they do not say it, the source added.
Yep.
Various sources who served in IDF intelligence units said that at least until the current war, Army protocols allowed for attacking power targets only when the buildings were empty of residents at the time of the strike. However, testimonies and videos from Gaza suggest that since October 7th, some of these targets have been attacked without prior notice being given to their occupants, killing entire families as a result. Whew. The wide-scale targeting of residential homes can be derived from public and official data. According to the government media office in Gaza, which has been providing death tolls since the Gaza Health Ministry stopped doing so on the 11th of November due to the collapse of health services in the Strip. By the time the temporary ceasefire took hold on November 23rd, Israel killed 14,800 Palestinians in Gaza. Approximately 6,000 of them were children and 4,000 were women, who together constitute more than 67% of the total. The figures provided by the Health Ministry and the Government Media Office, both of which fall under the auspices of the Hamas government, do not deviate significantly from Israeli estimates. The Gaza Health Ministry furthermore does not specify how many of the dead belong to military wings of Hamas or Islamic Jihad. The army estimates between 1,000 and 3,000 armed Palestinian militants have been killed. According to media reports in Israel, some of the dead militants are buried under rubble or inside Hamas's underground tunnel system, and were therefore not tallied in official counts. No one's dead until you got a body. Very good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
I apologize. I'm collecting my breath again. It was a dialysis day. I'm a little slow today.
I think the key here is that Israel was, I don't want to say upset because that's too mild, but they were shocked, horrified by what happened. Kind of to the extent that the U.S. was when Pearl Harbor was bombed or when 9/11 occurred. It's one of those events that the national population wants to see avenged because of the way it was conducted. And I think those in power are looking at this saying, well, this gives us carte blanche to do everything that we wanted to for forever.
Yes. The army claimed that the demand to evacuate civilians from the Strip's north was intended to protect lives. Palestinians, however, see this as a mass displacement as part of a new Nakba. It would be the ethnic cleansing that occurred around the 1948 War for Israeli Independence. Yeah, this is worth talking about. In the first 5 days of fighting, it dropped 6,000 bombs on the Strip, with a total weight of about 4,000 tons. I have checked since this article came out. The total amount of bombs dropped alone is 18,000 tons of explosives on Gaza in the 2 months since this has started. Additionally, they have expended over 100,000 155 millimeter artillery shells.
Curious. The original Hamas attack killed what, about 1,300 people, I think.
Give or take, yes.
Yeah. What are the current casualty estimates among Palestinians?
Let's look. 15,000 can't be accurate anymore, even with despite the ceasefire. Let's see here. I want letters, not numbers. Current civilian.
Regardless, it's more than 10 times the amount.
Yes.
And when you particularly consider the fact that a significant number of the casualties that Hamas caused were not civilians, they were military personnel. I'm not saying that makes it better. I'm just saying that provides some thin film of justifiability to it.
Depending on the conduct in question at the Israeli bases, yes, I would say so. Um,
So then, where do you get this is an appropriately proportional attack or response?
I personally don't, but that's why I'm here.
You're a bad.
There's a fundamental problem. The document I have posted all over Twitter. I will put it up in our Discord tonight as well for everyone to read through fully. It is quite extensive, quite long, and goes on about this basically in some detail for quite some time. Um, I don't want to necessarily read the entire thing beyond providing some commentary. Hamas is, I think, an absolute issue for both the PLO. Mohammed Abbas has been denouncing Hamas apparently in every private phone call. But so it's obviously an issue for both the PLO and Israel. But there is no campaign that Israel can wage whatsoever that will see them wipe out Hamas.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate statement.
Like if things get too hot, they're just gonna go and scurry off to Egypt, and that's that, and sit
Well, now,
underground, or
most of the Arabs are living in like Dubai right now.
yes, like they could do all of this. Israel's going to do all of this, and it's essentially going to be meaningless because Hamas will be back in 2 years' time. They will fire rockets again well before that, and we will all sit here and wonder, well, didn't you wipe out Hamas the last time? You were
Yeah.
talking about it for 5 months.
And you can almost hear the claims that, well, if you hadn't tied our hands, we could have solved the problem.
That's what they're going to say, but by the flip
Oh,
side,
you know it.
yes, that's exactly what they're going to say. But by the flip side, like, this is horrifying. What's happening in Gaza is
Yeah.
horrible. But there's an extra level of horror to it because it's not going to lead to the stated outcome. And the extra level is, what if the outcome is far worse? What if the outcome is to kill the Palestinians? What if the outcome is to resume settlements? The expectation is we're going to sit by and watch it happen. And we know we're going to do it because we've done it for 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah. I think that's entirely predictable.
It's I don't know how to improve this quality of volume here on your end. You come in powerful after a minute, and then but the first part isn't. Uh, and I'm completely
I
hopeless
see
with.
what you got for you.
Yeah, we know we know the end of this here. That's the problem. We know we're just going to sit by and let it happen. Um, and we know it's wrong. Like people understand this is wrong. That's why they're doing everything in their power to do whataboutisms about anti-Semitism and Hamas and all of this, because no one wants you to focus on this. They don't want you to see it. Um, and I'll be honest, paired with the rest of the course of the week, it's been trying.